I've been using Windows to produce music for almost 30 years, so why now am I switching to Mac? This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Follow the VIP link in the description down below to get 7% off an already amazing price to distribute your music to the world. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. I've been using Windows since version 3.1 and I've used it for music production since about 1995. Indeed, during many of those years, my main DAW was a PC only DAW called Cakewalk. We'll talk about that a little later on. Also during that time, I've lost count of the number of high-spec custom PCs I've built for both myself and for other people as well. And I like to think I've built up a pretty decent knowledge of PC components and how to optimize them for not only music production, but also video production and 3D design as well. Now, this is not to say I've been completely oblivious to Macs. I've often owned some Macs over the years as my kind of second machines, and indeed I do have a humble old MacBook Pro 2016 model with an i7 in there, which I use every day for things like sort of emails, a bit of office work, and some occasional music production, albeit at a low level when I'm kind of mobile and stuff. But it doesn't compare to the main PC machine you can see over my left shoulder. So why on earth, a couple of days ago, did I order a brand new MacBook Pro with a new M4 Pro chip in it, a couple of upgrades, etc. And why am I going to be using it as my main machine for, well, everything? We'll get into that. It's a little bit of a journey. But before I do get into that, I just want to sort of dispel a couple of myths about PCs that I often hear from Mac enthusiasts. The first myth is that PCs are horribly unreliable. They're crashing all the time. You're always facing a blue screen of death, etc. This is something that Mac fanboys say a lot, and I think it's born out of some sort of experience from like 15 years ago or something when they got burnt. It may have been quite true back then, but I would say at least for the last 10 years, Windows users have enjoyed a much more stable experience. I can't remember the last time I had a blue screen of death or when my computer just randomly crashed or something like that. As long as you build your PC well, you use the correct components, etc., then it's perfectly possible to build a very stable machine. And indeed, if that was the case, or if that myth was true, I would have swapped to Mac years ago, because obviously I can't really afford any downtime at all in my business. And touch wood, this thing hasn't let me down at all. That's not really the reason, well, not quite, that I'm swapping over. I guess we'll get to that later. Now, the second myth is that PCs are way too noisy with all their noisy fans and things for music production. Well, again, take a look at that PC over my left shoulder. I know you might find this difficult to believe, but it's at least as silent as your MacBook when it's idling. It is so close to silent. There's many more noisy things in this studio. At the moment, for example, the fans on the lights that are shining on me are actually way more noisy. The car going by outside is more noisy than my PC is. When people visit this studio, it's one of the things they remark upon. They look at my PC, they say, oh, that looks cool, and it's so quiet. Again, if you choose the correct components and you build a PC correctly, it's very possible to build one which is close to silent. Now, having said that, the fans do spin up and get louder while I'm rendering video, okay? Now, at that point, I'm normally having a cup of coffee anyway, so it doesn't bother me. But never, ever during music production do those fans spin up to something which makes it impossible for me to track in here or mix or anything like that. That's just a myth which is based upon poor PC builds, I would say. Now, the final sort of myth is a myth, sort of a difference of opinion I would get to, is that Mac OS is better than Windows. Look, I do use both on a daily basis, and honestly, I think they're about equal. There are some things on Mac OS that everybody who goes from Windows to Mac just shakes their head and go, why don't you just do it like this? It's so much easier. Now, likewise, I can say there are some things in Windows that are incredibly annoying. I just think it's pretty much in the balance, or it may just depend on how your brain is kind of wired. I don't know. Now, having got those myths out of the way, there's one particular myth that PC fanboys have, which I kind of want to dispel now. PCs are much more upgradable than Macs. Well, actually, there's quite a lot of truth in this, especially when you consider that with the last few generations of Macs, you can't upgrade the RAM and the internal storage, for example. But what's the actual experience for a PC user when they go to make those upgrades? Well, I've noticed a bit of a pattern over my last few upgrades. It will usually happen after about 3.5 to 4 years when I notice that there's been a significant performance increase in the CPU. Now, it would be nice to think I could just upgrade that CPU and we'd all be hunky-dory. However, the reality is you usually have to upgrade the motherboard as well, because that CPU won't even physically fit in that old socket. Now, usually it's desirable to upgrade the memory as well, either because, well, maybe you have to because it's a new type of memory, but more often it will be because you don't want the memory to be a bottleneck and you want to have the fastest memory to go along with the fastest CPU. Now, along with all of this, especially with recent generations of Intel CPUs, you're probably going to need a new power supply. Those things need a lot more power than they used to. Now, before you know it, rather than just upgrading that one component that you wanted to upgrade, you've almost upgraded your whole PC, apart from, say, the case and a little bit of internal storage. Yeah, I think it's really good if you're into that kind of thing. I probably don't have as much time for it as I used to, if I'm honest with you. And I just don't think it's as dreamy as an experience as we like to make out to the Mac fanboys who are giving us a hard time. So all of this talk of upgrade brings me to my current predicament. My current machine is a kind of a 3-year-old spec. I'm using an 11th generation i9. It's got 64 gigabytes of RAM. I've got an RTX 3060 Ti GPU in there, and I have a liquid cooling system. And in fact, those 3 fans that you can see spinning are blowing across the radiator for that system. It's very quiet and it works very well indeed. So I haven't been so much thinking of upgrading as kind of avoiding upgrading. It does what I want it to do, or has been doing what I want it to do, I should say. And I've actually kind of heard some horror stories from people about the more recent generations, especially from Intel. Now, one of the main problems that people talk about is that the new processors are so difficult to keep cool. Now, if you don't really understand these things, the problem with that is that when CPUs get too hot, they don't so much explode as the system will slow them down. So they won't be processing things as fast. It's called choking. Now, in order to combat that, of course, we use cooling systems to keep them cool enough so they can work at full capacity. But everything I'm hearing about the new processors indicates that it's a high risk to upgrade at the moment, because the fans need to be run at such a high level that it would just be unacceptable to be used in a music production environment. Now, I know there's going to be people talking about Ryzen processors and things like that in the comments, but honestly, I just don't even want to go there. It's such a risk to build an expensive machine like this to find out that it's useless to me in my music studio, that this is what's making me hesitant to upgrade along a PC path. Now, the other thing that's been bothering me, or things I've been hearing bad things about, is Thunderbolt. Now, Thunderbolt's always been a bit tricky on PC. When I built this PC, I did a lot of research to make sure that the Thunderbolt was going to be good enough for me to run my two main Thunderbolt interfaces, which is my Antelope Audio Synergy Core Discrete 8 and also my Universal Audio Apollo X4 that I run as well. Both Thunderbolt devices. And at the moment on this current PC, I've never had a problem with them. They run absolutely perfectly. I know people hear horror stories about this all the time on PC, but honestly, I think, again, if you do your research, you know, you can avoid these issues. The problem is, as I'm doing my research, I'm not seeing a way to definitely avoid Thunderbolt issues. To be honest with you, especially if I go down the AMD route. It's even worse than with Intel motherboards. Now, I know there's going to be people who have good experiences with this and it goes okay, and maybe they'll let me know about that in the comments down below, but it's a stupidly risky thing for me to do, to spend thousands of dollars to build a new PC when it may turn out to be completely useless to me. Not only can I not afford that kind of expense, but also I can't afford the time it will inevitably cost me in terms of trying to troubleshoot exactly where the issues are. However, I'm still a believer in, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So what's brought me to this point where I want to jump ship now? So this brings me to my decision to move from PC to MacBook, and it wasn't something that I intended at all. It actually started out with me wanting to upgrade my laptop. I realized that in 2025 I was going to be doing quite a lot more traveling, and I wanted to be able to work while I was on the go. That meant getting a new laptop with a high spec and really good graphics capabilities, because of course I do quite a lot of video editing. I didn't really even consider a new MacBook, to be honest with you, because they're so much more expensive than their Windows sort of equivalents. The problem was, as I looked more and more at these high-spec Windows machines, there was a common theme coming up when I looked at user experiences, and that came in two main forms. First, to run them at that kind of power that you need for, say, video editing, the battery life is horrible. Often it's only like, say, 2 hours or something like that. So if I was on a long haul flight, I could maybe do some video editing for part of that time, but yeah, I probably wasn't going to be able to do it. Now, the other issue was that in order to get that kind of performance on a laptop, the fans really need to spin up loud, and people talk about these things sounding like kind of jet engines and things. That's a lot of people's experience, and that just seemed kind of disappointing to me, you know, that I would be able to use this thing and I could get away with, say, plugging it into power, doing some video editing, being irritated by the fans spinning, but not even really make use of it in my studio here, because it was going to be more noisy than the desktop behind me. And it was just kind of irritating to think I was going to spend all of that money and not really get what I wanted, which is a machine that I can truly use on the go for long periods of time without the noise factor as well. And the more and more I looked at it, the more I kept coming back to any of the last 3 to 4 generations of Mac. They run quieter, they run longer on battery, and if you get the right spec, they're at least as powerful as machines like this behind me, if not much more powerful. I guess the proof is going to be in the pudding in terms of that for me. So I came to this decision, and I really didn't want to spend all this money, to be honest with you. It's quite a lot of money for me to spend. And then it just dawned upon me, why would I have all of that power equivalent to this and then not use it in the studio here? Why would I keep swapping between two operating systems? And you can see where I'm going with this. Suddenly it dawned upon me, this may as well be my main machine, and then I don't even have to think about those horrible upgrade issues I'm likely to have if I, say, go for the 15th generation of Intel processor. Now, I know many of my incredibly valued subscribers are Cakewalk users, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to say quickly, one thing that doesn't change regardless of whether you're using Mac or PC is the fact that DistroKid, our sponsor, makes it incredibly easy for you to release your music to places like Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, etc. And if you follow that VIP link in the description down below, you'll get 7% off your first year of membership. Now, I'm sure most of you are aware by now that my main production DAW is actually PreSonus Studio One. But I do have a wonderful history with Cakewalk and the Cakewalk community, which is so dear to me. I can't tell you. I wouldn't really have this channel if it wasn't for that community. So for a long time now, it's part of the reason why I've stayed with PC, because it's meant that I could keep producing Cakewalk tutorials if I needed to, or test things out when people were having problems and try and resolve problems for them. But I have to tell you, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I'm getting less and less confident about Cakewalk's future. It's such a shame because I still think it's a really good DAW and it's a massive part of digital music production history. And I don't really have a problem with the software as such, but this is my personal opinion, I just think that the changes that have happened over the last year have been a bit of a marketing disaster, and it's really put a lot of people off of Cakewalk because it makes you feel insecure about its future. And that insecurity that I have about its future means that I can't afford to invest lots of time, for example, on courses that I was intending to make for Cakewalk, which, you know, I don't know if I'm going to make courses for a DAW that is not even going to be used by people in the near future. You know, sorry to be a bit of a downer, but it's just something I've had to consider really seriously. And so I've been hanging in there using a PC, just making sure I could support the Cakewalk community. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to make Cakewalk content on a Mac. So what I've done is I've acquired a perfectly capable and recent model Windows laptop, which I can still use and is quite capable of running Cakewalk, and that's how I'm going to keep some of that content going. And it's with deep regret that I say this to all of you, because I know this is going to be disappointing to you, but Cakewalk themselves are making it incredibly difficult for me to make a decision as a business to invest my time and energy into much more Cakewalk content. Now, in terms of my Studio One viewers, it doesn't really make any difference to you at all what I'm doing here. However, I will say, as more of a happy coincidence, I have noticed with the benchmarks I've seen coming out that this is a really great time to switch to the new M4 processors if you're a Studio One user, because what we're seeing, at least from the benchmarks, is there's quite a significant jump in this generation's processing with Studio One in comparison to the M1, M2 and M3 chips. So if you're considering upgrade, then I think it looks like you're going to see a significant difference. Now, on that note, it is worth, of course, subscribing to this channel or looking out for videos from me, because in the next few weeks, I definitely will make a video dedicated to my new MacBook Pro and how it performs with Studio One, so you can look out for that. Now, this video has dragged on a lot longer than I intended it to. I was going to talk about some of the benefits of the Mac OS ecosystem in terms of music production, etc. I think I've sort of run out of time, and I'm sure people will talk about it in the comments down below. Now, I will say I'm not making this decision with like 100% confidence. I'm a little nervous about it, truth be told. There's things about the Mac OS that I really do find difficult at times. Will I get used to them when I use it much more often? I guess time is going to tell, and I'm going to tell you in a video sometime down the line. I would love for you to tell me whether you think I've made a mistake or not in the comments down below. I'm sure you're going to debate it, and I'm sure you're going to argue about it. The only thing I ask is you at least keep reasonably civil with each other. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.